decisions can be made in our mind and then we can change our minds. That won't affect karma. Karma comes from actions, something we do. Really, karma doesn't have an agenda. Karma doesn't focus on good or bad. Karma focuses on positive and negative. Just like the law of gravity, there's up, there's down. It doesn't have an agenda. So my name is Soph Stafford. I'm an energy alchemist and Akashic Records practitioner who also works with neuro-linguistic programming and timeline therapy techniques. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, but I work with people from all over the world to help them understand more deeply who they are at soul level and also what their gifts are and uncover any karmic patterns that may be holding them back. Yeah, so a little bit about me before I had my near-death experience. I lived in rural Victoria in Australia in a nice little community. And as I was growing up, I used to spend a lot of time out with friends, riding bikes, playing in the play equipment at the school, having adventures, climbing trees, those sorts of things. I was a real outdoorsy kind of kid. And before I had my near-death experience, I had a couple of near-death experiences, which I can share with you today. So right before I turned 13 was when I had my near-death experience. So I became very, very ill and I was admitted into hospital and they weren't really sure what was going on with me. They didn't know whether I perhaps had kidney stones or, some mystery pain, but I was in a lot of pain and I was very, very ill. I was in hospital for about 24 hours. And then eventually my mum got really fed up and said to the doctors, you need to do something to help her. She's really unwell. So they took me in for surgery and it turns out I had appendicitis and my appendix had actually ruptured, which is not good. And I remember going into the surgery and going under with the anesthesia. And then I remember sort of floating up above my body and still being in the room, but being able to look down on myself on the operating table and seeing all the operating staff and the doctors and the anesthesiologist, everyone panicking. So I think at that time they must have been trying to revive me because my appendix had ruptured. I had severe peritonitis, which is a very nasty infection which comes from having a ruptured appendix. And so obviously they had some work to do on my physical body. And I was just watching it calmly and looking down and kind of observing the scene, knowing that I was outside my body and feeling very calm about that. I wasn't frightened. I wasn't trying to get back. I wasn't trying to go anywhere else. I was just really calmly observing. And so it was this really strange experience where I was very much outside of my body, but still in the room. So really what I saw when I was outside of my body was just lots of space around me. So I was conscious of being in the room, but also not being in the room. So I was witnessing what was happening for my physical body. But I was also experiencing this lightness and this feeling of being unembodied and just being an energy. And so I don't recall being called to cross over. I just remember sitting there and waiting to see what would happen. So it wasn't a push or a pull in one direction or another. It was just this state of being. And there was this really lovely calmness around it. And I was very aware that the universe existed. I was very aware that there was space outside of the room that I was in. I didn't see any angels when I was outside of my body. However, when I came back into my body, I was in the recovery room in the hospital. And I remember the thing that brought me back into my body was this beautiful nurse was sitting by my bedside and she was sitting sort of behind my head and she was just running her fingers through my hair. And I remember that being the most peaceful, comforting, lovely experience that I'd ever had in my life. And I believe that she was an angel. I believe that she was an angel that walks the earth, and she was helping me to come back into myself. So I didn't see her while I was floating above myself in the room, but I very much felt that she was an angel here on earth, helping me come back into myself safely and without feeling distressed. Before that had happened to me, I did have heightened senses. So when I was about 9, that was when I had a near-death experience. I was walking along the road and I came to a T intersection, and there was a car turning in front of me on the street I was about to cross, and another car came speeding along and hit that car. And that car started spinning, and I had the most vivid, clear voice in my head say, "Take 2 steps back, Sophie." And I did that automatically without thinking. And then the spinning car stopped touching me. It was right up against my body. So if I hadn't have taken those 2 nice big steps back, I would have been under that car. So I already felt like I had quite a strong connection to spirit and to receiving messages. But what I noticed after I had my out-of-body near-death experience was that got a little louder, and it got a little clearer, and it got a little bit more present. It was happening more often, and I was connecting and understanding it. As I got older, so my near-death experience happened just before I turned 13. I actually had my 13th birthday in hospital. And I was very ill for quite a long time because the appendix had ruptured. And I noticed as I started to get well again, I was starting to hear messages. And for me, the way that I processed that was not to share it with anyone. I just started journaling. And that made it really easy for me to understand the messages, because they kind of come through me. And if I don't write them down, they're almost gone most of the time. So I started with journaling. And then I noticed as I got older and as I became more of an adult, that people started to realize that I had this connection to spirit and to guidance, and so would ask me questions around guidance. Even though I never told anyone that that's what I was experiencing, it's like other people knew that about me. And so for the next 20 years or so, I would do energy work with people, and I would do energy clearings for people, but only if they asked me. And I would never tell anyone that I could do that, but somehow people found me. And so I kind of hid my abilities for a long time. I wouldn't lie. If someone said to me, "You know how you hear messages?" I'd say yes. But if no one brought it up, I wouldn't bring it up either, because I felt self-conscious about it, and I thought people would think I was a little zany or wacky. And so I pretty much kept it very close to my chest. So after I had my near-death experience, the messages that I started to receive came in the form of people who had crossed over. So I started to have that sort of clairaudient mediumship. So it started with just really hearing, and it took me a little while to understand where the voices were coming from and whether they were messages for me or for other people. So I'd say it probably took me about 10 years to really understand that it was messages from people who had crossed over, and not necessarily second guess myself. So that's how my energy work started. It started with mediumship. And so often I'd be spending time with a friend or a colleague or something like that, and I'd have one of their family members come in and start talking to me and wanting me to convey messages, which is a really strange feeling. And so I I am really careful about sharing messages because not all people want to hear things and not all people are ready to hear things. And sometimes when you're just going out for lunch with a friend, you don't want your grandmother to pop in and give you messages because sometimes that can trigger a lot of grief for people. So as I started realizing what mediumship looked like in the real world, so bringing messages into real people's lives, I started to realize that it didn't actually feel aligned for me because I believe that permission is everything and intent is everything. So unless someone is asking for that communication, I'm not going to be intrusive and provide it. So as I started setting those boundaries myself, the mediumship dialed down a little bit and I started to realize that I could work with the person instead of the person's crossed over relative. And that's how I shifted the way that I used my communication. I'm an energy alchemist and I also work with the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records you could think of as the filing cabinet for your soul or the internet of you. And so that's where all your soul level information is stored. And we can each always access our own Akashic Records, but no one else can access our Akashic Records without our permission. And the beautiful thing about working in that space is that you get to tell people really useful information that they can work with. So karma is really a universal law. So it doesn't have an agenda. I know there's that whole catchphrase that karma is a beep, but really karma doesn't have an agenda. Karma doesn't focus on good or bad. Karma focuses on positive and negative. Just like the law of gravity, there's up, there's down. It doesn't have an agenda. So with karmic patterns, what we're looking for is negative karmic patterns, not bad, but negative. So karmic patterns that don't serve our soul, that disconnect us from our universal energy, because we all have unique universal energy signatures. And when we have negative karmic patterns, it really limits our flow of that energy. So once we have conscious awareness of negative karmic patterns, we just start making positive choices around that and those karmic patterns fall away. So it's actually so simple for people to engage with information from the Akashic Records. And once they've had an Akashic Records reading, they have such powerful information about themselves that they can take away to really change their lives in small, simple steps. Yeah, so karma patterns follow us. So they follow our soul's journey and we release them once we start making new positive choices. So you could have established a karmic pattern 14 lifetimes ago, and we find that in the Akashic Records for you because you're ready to release it and change it. So you might have entered into a soulmate contract, which is inherently not good for us. Soulmate contracts sound romantic, but they're actually not. They keep us entangled in a negative dynamic with the other person. So if you established a soulmate contract 14 lifetimes ago, you can easily shift it once you have a conscious understanding of it. And the beauty of doing this work with the Akashic Records is we can find out what new positive steps look like for you. I believe the reason we incarnate as humans is so we can experience karma. By the same token, I also believe that people can cross over and become spirit guides because they want to experience karma from a different perspective. So they don't want to see the human perspective of karma, they want to see it from a distance, providing guidance for humans. So really, karma is such a beautiful way that we can learn more about who we are as individuals, but also can learn more about the people around us and the way that the human race works. So karma is instant and karma gives us beautiful feedback about ourselves. So the more we learn about karma and the more in tune we are with karmic patterns that we set up, the more we realize that we create our own human experience. We make karmic patterns through our own choices, and choices are at the level of action. Decisions can be made in our mind, and then we can change our minds. That won't affect karma. Karma comes from actions, something we do. Yeah, so people can always turn karmic patterns around. So even if it's a karmic pattern that you established 20 lifetimes ago, you can always change it by making positive choice. So negative karmic patterns come from making negative choice. That doesn't mean bad choice, it just means choices that aren't aligned for you. So for example, some people may find a career in the military very fulfilling and very nourishing and very suitable for their energy center. Other people may find that it's a negative choice for them. So if they then go and join the military, the likelihood is that they are setting up a negative karmic pattern for themselves. And the same can be true for entering into marriages where it's not about love, it's about obtaining wealth or status or something like that. It's really about what works for you, and your karma comes from what works for you. So it's very individualized. For some people, going to university is a really positive thing and it creates a positive karmic pattern for themselves. For other people, they might be going to university not because they want to study a particular thing, but because they feel obligated because their parents have put a lot of pressure on them. So that might establish a negative karmic pattern for them. So the importance of working in the Akashic records is that you're finding out what is positive and what is negative for you as an individual, and then you just start making small positive choices and negative karmic patterns drop away. I wouldn't say I believe in God in the sense that I'm not part of an organized religion. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in a higher power. I just don't label it as God. But I also believe that God has an important place for humankind. If religion is what calls you, and that is a belief system that serves you well, and it's a belief system that's your own, not something you've been forced into, then that belief in God and religion is beautiful and positive for you. It's just not what I necessarily believe. I think people create their own experiences. So I don't believe that God is punishing the earth or that natural disasters are a reflection of God. That's not my model of how the world works. But I respect that some people may feel differently about that. I believe that bad behavior comes from negative karmic patterns. So I believe that if people engage in unaligned choices for a very long time, they become so disconnected from their own energy source that they don't really connect with good and bad karma anymore. They're really just operating at a very base level. And I think that's where bad actions and tension and fighting comes from. I don't necessarily believe that as humans we're being punished. I believe that we're all learning lessons, and some people are really great at learning lessons, and some people need to do the same thing over and over and over again, and they'll repeat it lifetime after lifetime after lifetime before learning those karmic lessons. So that's really my model of how the world works, but I absolutely understand if that's not aligned with how other people perceive things. So I don't believe that people are punished in the afterlife. I believe that when people cross over, sometimes they can become quite lost. So if they're lost as humans, I think they find it hard to walk into their next aspect of their soul's journey. So quite often when I'm working with clients, I will see lost or attaching souls connected with that client who are drawing vital energy from the client because that soul doesn't know how to connect with its own source energy. So I don't believe they're being punished as such. I just believe that they become truly, truly lost and they don't know how to connect in with their own source energy. And so they will attach to humans and drain our batteries a little bit. So quite often when I'm working with a client doing an energy alchemy session, I'll be checking to make sure that they don't have any attached souls or lost souls that are attached to them. So attaching souls can come from making a soul level contract or a soul level bargain with someone we've incarnated with in a previous life or in a current life. And lost souls can be souls that are just literally lost. They don't know how to cross themselves over. And so they'll attach to the first person that they feel an energetic match with. So they're not to be feared. They're not out to do us any harm. They're just lost. And so I can help support clearing those lost souls and putting them on their next path in their soul's journey. It's really important, if you do feel like you have an attached soul or a lost soul, that you don't just try and flick it off yourself and tell it to go somewhere else. It's really important that we help them find their path for their soul's journey. So I believe that when we're suffering, it's a message from ourselves. We've created a situation where we're suffering. So that's not with judgment. That's not to say that we go along seeking bad things out. But I sometimes feel that when we suffer, we learn a lot about ourselves. So suffering can be a learning phase in our lives, or it can be a really clear signal that we're making some negative choices and we need to make more positive choices to create more abundance for ourselves. When we raise our own vibration, we're less likely to establish negative karmic patterns because we're so much more connected to our own source energy. So when we're stepping into positive karmic patterns, that keeps reflecting back to us. And so we have more positive experiences. I think the beauty of raising our own vibration and making sure that we're energetically clear is that we don't have lost souls attaching to us, and we don't have souls that we've previously incarnated with attaching to us any longer, which means we're standing in our own energy and we're not giving it to other beings. So I think it's really, really worthwhile always doing some energy work and always doing a health check for yourself. My belief is in practical spirituality. So I'm not into the super woo-woo stuff. I think spirituality has to fit into our humanity. So it has to be practical, and it has to be user-friendly, and it has to be something that we can all access easily. So I think if you can do your own energy work, fabulous. If you need some support with that, call out to someone, call out to a good practitioner, set up a time to work with that person, because our energetic health is just as important as our physical health and our mental, emotional health. We've got to look after the whole package. After my near-death experience, I think change came slowly. So I started to hear messages more clearly, and I started to have that mediumship aspect, but I also pushed against that. I didn't want that to define me, and that's why I was very secretive and quiet about it. Last year, I had a car accident. So I was driving home from my job and a lady hit me, and it was quite a nasty car accident. We were both okay, thankfully, but the cars weren't. And we got out of the cars and she went into shock straight away. She was really distressed and really upset. And I remember just sitting with her and saying, okay, who do we need to call? Who do you need here to support you? What are your insurance details? Let's swap license details. Let's do all those things and let's just calm down. Cars can be fixed. We're both safe. That's the main thing. And that night she sent me a message saying, I'm really sorry that I caused the accident, but if I had to hit anyone, I'm glad it was you because you were so kind to me. And that kind of made me think about things quite differently, because I realized that if in a moment where I was distressed, I was able to support someone else and be kind and be authentic, I probably needed to bring that into more of my life. So instead of working in my corporate role where I was working in early careers and working in graduate programs, I decided to shift gears and actually step more fully into my aligned gifts, which is working with people to help them understand who they are at soul level and to shift negative karmic patterns and to get them close to their energy source. And I don't regret that decision at all. It's absolutely changed my life, and I think I can see the benefit that my clients have received from doing that, which makes me feel really good. I absolutely believe in the law of attraction and manifesting. So before I actually started working in this business, I had a little side hustle where I was entering contests and entering competitions and sweepstakes. So with that, through manifesting, I was able to win prizes like tickets to the United States or holidays overseas or accommodation in Spain. And I won a $14,000 diamond ring, and I've manifested meeting tons of celebrities because that's what I really love doing. So absolutely believe in the power of manifestation. I think the key with manifesting is understanding the language that we respond to. So it's really important when you're trying to manifest something that you're very specific about it, that it's an ethical thing to manifest. So we don't want to manifest harm to others or anything like that. And that you're using internal language that signals your mind and your spirit that you already have the thing you're trying to manifest. So it's not I want, it's I have. And it's definitely not I don't want, because the universe and our unconscious mind don't understand words like don't and can't and shouldn't. So it's really important, if you're going to start a manifesting journey, do a little bit of research, understand it, to make sure that you are truly manifesting in the most congruent way. Manifesting, I think, is universal, but it's also personal. So you have to make sure that what you're manifesting, you're actually taking positive steps towards. So it's no good saying, I want to manifest having blonde hair, and you've got black hair, and not booking in to see a hairdresser. Your hair's not going to turn blonde overnight because you're manifesting it. You have to take positive steps towards it. So with any kind of manifestation, I kind of think of it as pray and shuffle your feet, which means absolutely manifest in your mind the things you want, but also take action to make it happen. I could never win a $14,000 diamond ring if I hadn't entered the competition. I was never going to win if my name wasn't in the draw. So it's magic, but it's also action. I think one of the things that I think is really valuable when you're preparing for the future is understanding the people around you and understanding the other supports that you have universally. I believe that we have a team of spirit guides. I also believe that we can hire, fire, and retire them. So if we've hired a spirit guide when we're very small to help us stay quiet in class, and we've forgotten to fire it, we might still be staying quiet as adults when we don't need to be. So knowing when to hire, fire, and retire your spirit guides is really important for setting up your best future. So if I've got any message at all, it's understand who's on your spiritual squad. So I call them your woohoo crew. So who's on your team? Make sure they're actually working with you in your goals for manifesting your best life experience, because you don't want people on the team that aren't working towards the things you want. Yeah, so people can always turn karmic patterns around. So even if it's a karmic pattern that you established 20 lifetimes ago, you can always change it by making positive choice. So negative karmic patterns come from making negative choice. That doesn't mean bad choice, it just means choices that aren't aligned for you. So for example, some people may find a career in the military very fulfilling and very nourishing and very suitable for their energy center. Other people may find that it's a negative choice for them. So if they then go and join the military, the likelihood is that they are setting up a negative karmic pattern for themselves. And the same can be true for entering into marriages where it's not about love, it's about obtaining wealth or status or something like that. It's really about what works for you, and your karma comes from what works for you. So it's very individualized. For some people, going to university is a really positive thing and it creates a positive karmic pattern for themselves. For other people, they might be going to university not because they want to study a particular thing, but because they feel obligated because their parents have put a lot of pressure on them. So that might establish a negative karmic pattern for them. So the importance of working in the Akashic records is that you're finding out what is positive and what is negative for you as an individual, and then you just start making small positive choices and negative karmic patterns drop away. I would love to connect with anyone who feels called to work with me. You can find me at my website, which is sophthealchemist.com, or on Instagram at sophthealchemist.com and Facebook, sophthealchemist.com.